They left her to freeze in a blizzard because she had no wolf. But the girl they dumped in that frozen wasteland wasn't broken. She was poisoned. And when the most feared alpha in the Northern Territories found her dying in the snow, everything her pack believed about weakness was about to be shattered. This is the story of Lyria Hale, the wolf they tried to erase, and the queen they created by mistake. If you're watching from Chicago, Miami, Houston, or anywhere else tonight, drop your city in the comments below and smash that like button. You're going to want to see how this ends. Trust me, no one saw this coming. The Iron Ridge Pack Hall smelled like pine smoke and old blood. Lyria Hale stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, her bare feet cold against the stone floor, while 200 wolves watched her with eyes that gleamed like cut glass in the firelight. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be hers. 18 years. 18 years of waiting, of enduring whispers and sideways glances, of being the only child in the pack whose wolf had never surfaced. But the elders had promised her parents before they died, promised her foster family, promised her that some wolves were just late bloomers, that her wolf would come when the time was right. Tonight was the full moon of her 18th birthday. If there was ever a right time, this was it. Lyria Hale! Alpha Declan Voss's voice cut through the hall like a blade through silk. He stood on the raised platform at the far end of the room, his massive frame backlit by the roaring hearth behind him. He'd taken the Alpha title only 6 months ago after his father's sudden death, and he ruled Iron Ridge with an iron fist that matched the pack's name. Step forward. Lyria obeyed, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The ceremonial robe they'd given her, thin white linen that did nothing against the February cold seeping through the stone walls, whispered against her legs as she walked. She could feel every eye on her, judging, waiting. Please, she thought desperately, sending the prayer to whatever force governed the wolves inside them all. Please let tonight be the night. Declan's pale blue eyes swept over her with something that looked like disgust poorly masked as patience. He was only 25, but he carried himself like a king, chin high, shoulders broad, every movement deliberate and commanding. The pack loved him for his strength. Lyria had once admired it too. You stand before your pack, Declan announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. On the night the moon calls to the wolf within. You have waited longer than most. Tonight, we will see if that wait was worth it, or if the bloodline that produced you has finally run dry. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Lyria's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin up. She'd learned early that showing weakness to wolves only made them bite harder. Beside Declan, his beta, a cruel-faced man named Marcus with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, leaned in and whispered something. Declan's mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The council has agreed, Declan continued, to give you one final chance. If your wolf rises tonight, you will take your place among us as a full member of Iron Ridge. If not, he paused, letting the silence stretch like a noose. Then we must accept what the moon has already told us, that you are wolfless, and wolfless humans have no place in a pack. The words hit like a physical blow. Lyria's breath caught in her throat. That's not pack law, she said, and her voice came out stronger than she felt. My parents were both wolves. I have every right. Your parents are dead, Marcus interrupted, his tone flat and final. And they left behind a daughter who's done nothing but drain pack resources for 18 years. No wolf, no strength, no use. She can't even shift, someone called from the crowd. Lyria recognized the voice as Petra, one of the pack's enforcers. What good is a wolf who can't fight? Maybe she's just broken, another voice added, followed by more laughter. Lyria's hands curled into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them she'd felt her wolf. In dreams, in moments of fear or rage, like a shadow moving just beneath her skin. But the words died in her throat because what if they were right? What if she really was broken? Declan raised one hand, and the hall fell silent. Enough, he said. Then he looked directly at Lyria, and there was something cold and final in his gaze. We'll settle this now. Strip. Lyria blinked. What? You heard me. If you want to prove you're a wolf, then shift. Right here, right now, in front of the entire pack. His smile widened, showing teeth. Unless you'd like to admit you've been wasting our time all along. Her pulse roared in her ears. The ceremonial shifting, the one she'd imagined 1,000 times, was supposed to happen in private under the guidance of an elder. Not like this. Not as a spectacle, a humiliation, a test designed for her to fail. But she had no choice. Lyria's shaking hands went to the ties of her robe. She could feel the weight of 200 stairs as she let the linen fall to the floor. The cold air bit at her skin, but she barely felt it. All her focus had narrowed to a single desperate thought. Come on, please, I know you're in there. She closed her eyes, reached deep inside herself, past the fear and shame, searching for that shadow she'd felt so many times before. The wolf who'd growled in her dreams. The presence that had always felt just out of reach. Please. She waited. The hall was so quiet she could hear the crack and pop of the fire. Nothing. No heat, no surge of power, no wolf rising to the surface, just silence. Lyria opened her eyes to find Declan watching her with something that looked almost like pity. Almost. Well, he said softly, I think that's answer enough. The hall erupted, voices overlapped in a cacophony of mockery and disbelief. I knew it. 18 years for nothing. She's useless. Get her out of here. Lyria stood frozen, naked and trembling, as the pack she'd grown up with, the people who'd known her since birth, tore her apart with their words. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to hide. Silence! Declan's voice cracked like a whip. The hall fell quiet again, but the damage was done. Lyria could see it in their faces. The disgust, the disappointment, the finality. She was no longer one of them. Maybe she never had been. Declan descended from the platform, his boots echoing against the stone. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could smell the pine and leather scent that clung to all dominant wolves. Lyria, hail, he said, his voice formal now, ritualistic. The Iron Ridge Pack has given you every opportunity to prove your worth. You have failed. By the authority granted to me as Alpha, I hereby declare you rogue. You are no longer under our protection. You are no longer welcome in our territory. You are nothing. The word hit like a slap. Lyria's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. You can't do this, she whispered. I was born here. This is my home. Your home, Marcus said, stepping forward with a bundle of clothes in his hands, is wherever you end up tonight, if you survive. He tossed the bundle at her feet, just a thin shirt and a pair of worn pants. No coat, no boots. You have 10 minutes to get out of our sight. After that, if any wolf sees you on Iron Ridge land, they have my permission to kill you. Lyria's hands shook as she grabbed the clothes and pulled them on. The fabric was rough and cold, barely better than nothing. Around her, the pack had already started to disperse, conversation rising as if she were already gone, already forgotten. She looked up one last time, searching the crowd for a single friendly face, someone who might object, someone who might fight for her. But there was no one. Even Sarah, her foster mother, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, stood near the back of the hall with her eyes downcast, her mouth pressed into a thin line. She wouldn't meet Lyria's gaze. No one would. Lyria turned and walked toward the hall's main doors, every step feeling like it might be her last. The February wind hit her the moment she stepped outside, cutting through the thin clothes like knives. Snow was already falling, thick, heavy flakes that stuck to her hair and eyelashes. Behind her, the doors slammed shut with a finality that echoed across the compound. She stood there for a moment, staring at the iron gates that marked the boundary of the only home she'd ever known. Beyond them was the forest. Beyond that, the mountains. And beyond that, nothing. Just wilderness and cold and wolves who would kill her on sight if she crossed into their territory. Move, she told herself. You have 10 minutes. But her feet felt rooted to the ground. Because the truth was, she had nowhere to go. No allies. No plan. No wolf to protect her in a world that belonged to predators. She was about to take her first step toward the gates when she heard boots crunching in the snow behind her. Lyria turned to find Marcus and 2 other enforcers, both of them grinning like this was the highlight of their night. Change of plans, Marcus said casually. The Alpha doesn't want you wandering around nearby, telling sob stories to other packs, so we're going to make sure you end up somewhere remote. Ice flooded Lyria's veins. "What are you talking about?" Marcus's grin widened. "You'll see." Before she could react, one of the enforcers grabbed her arm and yanked her toward a waiting truck. She tried to fight, kicking, clawing, screaming, but it was useless. They were wolves. She was human. The fight was over before it began. They threw her into the truck bed like a sack of grain and slammed the tailgate shut. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle lurched forward into the storm. Lyria scrambled to her knees, gripping the side of the truck as it barreled down the mountain road. Snow whipped past her face, stinging her skin. The wind was so loud she could barely hear herself think. "Where are you taking me?" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. Marcus leaned out the driver's window, his face barely visible through the snow. "Frost Pass," he shouted back, laughing. "Let's see how long you last up there." Frost Pass. Lyria's blood turned to ice. Frost Pass was a stretch of mountain territory so remote and brutal that even wolves avoided it. The elevation was too high, the temperatures too extreme, the terrain too unforgiving. It sat on the border between Iron Ridge land and the Northern Territories, wild, unclaimed, and deadly. If they left her there, she would die. Not in days, in hours. The truck climbed higher and higher, the road growing narrower and more treacherous with every mile. Lyria's fingers were already numb, her teeth chattering so hard she thought they might crack. She tried to hold on, tried to stay conscious, but the cold was relentless. Finally, after what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, the truck skidded to a stop. The enforcers hauled her out and dumped her into the snow. Lyria hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. By the time she managed to sit up, the truck was already turning around. "Wait!" she gasped, but the word came out as barely a whisper. Marcus leaned out the window one last time. "Good luck, rogue," he called, his voice dripping with mockery. "Try not to freeze before the wolves find you." Then the truck disappeared into the storm, its tail light swallowed by the swirling white. Lyria knelt in the snow, alone. The wind screamed around her. The temperature was dropping fast. She could feel it in the way her skin burned, in the way her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled, tried to think, but her mind was starting to fog. "Get up," she told herself. "You have to move. You have to find shelter." But there was no shelter, just snow and rock, an endless frozen wilderness stretching in every direction. She crawled forward, toward what she didn't know. Maybe toward a tree line she thought she could see through the storm, maybe toward nothing. Her hands sank into the snow, numb and clumsy. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. "This is how I die," she thought distantly. Alone, forgotten, worthless. Her arms gave out, and she collapsed face first into the snow. The cold didn't feel so bad anymore. It almost felt warm. Lyria's eyes drifted closed. Somewhere far away she thought she heard something, a sound that didn't belong to the storm, deep and rumbling, like a growl or a voice. But it was probably just her imagination. Everything was going dark now. And then, nothing. Riven Thorn had lived for 32 years and ruled the Northern Territories for the last 10. In that time, he'd fought wars, crushed rebellions, and survived more assassination attempts than he cared to count. He was not a man or a wolf, easily surprised. But the scent that suddenly cut through the blizzard stopped him cold. Riven stood on a rocky outcropping halfway up the Frost Pass, his massive black wolf form barely visible against the storm. He'd been running a border patrol, something he insisted on doing himself despite his beta's protests, when the wind shifted, and brought with it the unmistakable scent of blood. Human blood. His wolf growled low in his chest, hackles rising. Humans didn't come to Frost Pass. It was too remote, too dangerous. The only humans who ever crossed into Northern Territory were either very brave or very stupid, or dying. Riven shifted mid-stride, his wolf form melting away to leave a man standing in the snow. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a presence that commanded attention even in the middle of a raging storm. His dark hair was dusted with snow, his gray eyes sharp and calculating as he scanned the landscape. The scent was stronger now, close. He moved toward it, his boots crunching through the deep snow. The wind howled around him, but he barely felt it. Wolves ran hot, especially alphas. The cold was an annoyance, not a threat. He followed the scent into a small grove of pine trees, their branches heavy with snow. And there, half buried beneath the largest tree, was a girl. Riven's wolf surged forward, a snarl building in his throat. She was young, maybe 18 or 19, with long dark hair matted with ice and skin so pale it was almost blue. She wore nothing but a thin shirt and pants, both soaked through and frozen stiff. Her eyes were closed, her lips parted slightly, her chest barely moving. She was dying. Riven knelt beside her, his hand hovering over her shoulder. The moment his fingers brushed her skin, his entire world shifted. Heat exploded through his chest. His wolf roared to life, louder and more violent than it had ever been, clawing at the inside of his mind with a single, undeniable truth. Mate. Riven jerked back like he'd been burned. No, that wasn't possible. He'd spent years searching for his mate, had traveled across every territory, met with every pack, attended every gathering. He'd started to believe she didn't exist, that the moon had decided he was meant to rule alone. And now she was here, dying in the snow? His wolf didn't care about the logistics. It only cared about one thing, saving her. Riven scooped her into his arms, and the bond snapped into place like a lock clicking shut. She was freezing, her body temperature dangerously low, her pulse thread and weak. If he didn't get her warm now, she wouldn't survive the night. He shifted again, his wolf form bursting forth with more speed than usual, fueled by desperation. With the girl cradled carefully in his jaws, he took off down the mountain at a dead run. His fortress was 10 miles south. Under normal circumstances, it would take an hour. Tonight, he made it in 20 minutes. The guards at the gate barely had time to register his approach before he was past them, racing through the courtyard and into the main lodge. He shifted back mid-stride, kicking open the door to the medical wing with enough force to crack the frame. "Doctor!" His voice thundered through the building. Dr. Iris Callan appeared in the hallway within seconds, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her sharp eyes already assessing the situation. She was the best healer in the Northern Territories, a wolf with decades of experience and a no-nonsense attitude that Riven respected. She took one look at the girl in his arms, and her expression darkened. "Bring her in, now!" Riven carried her into the examination room and laid her on the table. Iris was already moving, her hands flying over the girl's body, checking her pulse, her temperature, her breathing. "Severe hypothermia," Iris muttered. "Frostbite on her fingers and toes. Possible internal bleeding. How long was she out there?" "I don't know," Riven said, his voice rough. "I found her in Frost Pass." Iris's head snapped up. "Frost Pass? What the hell was she doing up there?" "That's what I intend to find out." Riven's hands curled into fists. "Can you save her?" Iris didn't answer right away. She was too focused on cutting away the girl's frozen clothes, wrapping her in heated blankets, inserting an IV. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she looked up. "Maybe," she said, "but it's going to be close." Riven's wolf growled, a sound that rumbled deep in his chest. "She doesn't get to die." Iris raised an eyebrow. "And why is that?" Riven met her gaze, and for the first time in 10 years, he let someone see past the mask of control he always wore. "Because she's mine." Understanding dawned in Iris's eyes. Her expression softened, just slightly. "Your mate?" "Yes." Iris nodded slowly. Then she turned back to the girl on the table, her movements becoming even more focused, more deliberate. "Then I'll do everything I can," she said quietly. "But, Riven, you need to prepare yourself. Even if she survives the hypothermia, there's something else." Riven's blood ran cold. "What?" Iris gestured to a tray of vials she'd just filled with the girl's blood. "I ran a basic panel while you were standing there brooding. Her blood work is wrong. There's a toxin in her system, something I've never seen before. It's suppressing her wolf." Riven stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "She's not human," Iris said. "She's a wolf. Or she's supposed to be. But someone's been poisoning her, for years based on the concentration levels. Whoever did this didn't just want to weaken her. They wanted to erase her wolf entirely." Rage, white-hot and all-consuming, flooded through Riven's veins. His wolf snarled, demanding blood, demanding justice for the girl lying broken and unconscious on the table. Someone had tried to kill his mate. And when he found out who, they were going to beg for death. "Can you fix it?" he asked, his voice deadly calm. "I can try," Iris said. "But detoxing her is going to be brutal. If her wolf has been suppressed this long, forcing it to surface could kill her. And if we don't?" Iris met his gaze. "Then she'll live as a human, weak, vulnerable, never knowing what she was meant to be." Riven looked down at the girl, his mate, and felt something crack open in his chest. She was small, fragile, but beneath the bruises and the frost, he could see the echo of something stronger, something fierce. She deserved to know what she was. "Do it," he said. "Whatever it takes. Bring her wolf back." Iris nodded. "Then we start tonight." Riven pulled up a chair beside the table and sat down, his eyes never leaving the girl's face. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she'd come from or who had hurt her, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was his, and he would burn the world down before he let anyone hurt her again. The girl didn't wake for 3 days. Riven spent every hour of those 72 hours in that medical room, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, listening to the machines that beeped and hummed around her like mechanical guardians. Iris had done everything she could, warmed her core temperature back to normal, treated the frostbite, pumped her full of antibiotics and fluids. But the girl remained unconscious, her body locked in some internal battle that Riven couldn't see or fight for her. It was driving him insane. His beta, Cade Brennan, had tried 3 times to drag him out of the medical wing. Each time, Riven had threatened to break his jaw if he didn't leave immediately. Cade, who'd known Riven since they were children and understood when to push and when to retreat, had wisely chosen retreat. But on the morning of the 4th day, Cade tried again. "You need to eat," Cade said, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. He was nearly as tall as Riven, with sandy blonde hair and eyes the color of amber. Where Riven was all sharp edges and controlled fury, Cade was steady and pragmatic, the balance that kept the Northern Territories from descending into chaos when Riven's temper flared. "And sleep. And probably shower because you smell like a wet dog that rolled in anxiety." Riven didn't look away from the girl. "Get out." She's stable," Cade pressed. "Iris said so herself. Sitting here staring at her isn't going to make her wake up faster." "I said get out." Cade sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. But the council is demanding answers. You disappeared for 3 days, came back with an unconscious girl covered in frost, and then locked yourself in here. People are starting to ask questions. Let them ask." "Riven..." "She's my mate, Cade." Riven's voice was low and dangerous, the kind of tone that made even dominant wolves step back. "The council can wait. The questions can wait. Everything can wait until she wakes up." Cade was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "Your mate," he said carefully. "Are you sure?" Riven finally looked at him, and the expression on his face must have been answer enough because Cade's eyes widened. "Hell," Cade breathed. "After all this time, I know." "Does she know?" "She hasn't exactly been conscious to tell." Cade moved closer, studying the girl with the same analytical gaze he used when assessing threats. "She's young, 18, maybe 19, Iris estimated based on bone structure. And someone tried to kill her. Yes. By dumping her in Frost Pass during a blizzard." Cade's jaw tightened. "That's not just murder. That's a message. Whoever did this wanted her to suffer." Riven's hands curled into fists. "I'm aware. Do we know who she is? What pack she's from?" "Not yet. Iris found traces of wolfsbane and silver nitrate in her bloodstream, compounds designed to suppress a wolf's ability to shift. Based on the concentration, she's been poisoned for years. Probably since childhood." Cade's expression darkened. That's barbaric. What kind of pack poisons their own? The kind that fears what she might become." Riven stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the fortress courtyard. Snow was still falling, though lighter now, delicate flakes that caught the morning sun. "Iris thinks she's from a royal bloodline. The toxin signatures match old records of suppressants used during the Purge Wars." Cade went very still. "The White Wolves?" "Maybe. Riven, the white wolves are extinct. They've been gone for over a century. That's what everyone believes. Riven turned back to face him. But what if they're not? What if some survived, went into hiding, and now someone's trying to finish what the purge started? Cade opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he said, "If you're right, and she really is a white wolf, then saving her just painted a target on your back. The old families won't like it. Hell, half the council still remembers the stories their grandparents told about the white wolves, how powerful they were, how dangerous. If word gets out that you've claimed one as your mate, then they'll deal with it," Riven said flatly. "I don't care what the council thinks. I don't care what the old families want. She's mine. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." Cade studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, then we prepare for war because that's where this is headed." "Good. But first," Cade said, his tone softening, "you need to let her wake up on her own terms. When she opens her eyes, the first thing she's going to see is you, a massive, terrifying alpha she's never met, staring at her like she's the only thing in the world that matters. That's going to be overwhelming enough without you looking like you haven't slept in a week." Riven wanted to argue, but he knew Cade was right. His mate, and damn, it still felt surreal to even think that word, was going to wake up confused and afraid. The last thing she needed was him looming over her like some kind of obsessed predator, even if that's exactly what he was. "Fine," Riven said finally. "I'll go clean up, but if she wakes while I'm gone, I'll come get you immediately," Cade promised. "You have my word." Riven nodded, taking one last look at the girl before forcing himself to leave the room. He made it halfway down the hall before his wolf started clawing at him to go back. It took everything he had to keep walking. Lyria woke to the smell of cedar and smoke. Her eyes opened slowly, her vision blurry and unfocused. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Everything felt wrong, the softness beneath her, the warmth surrounding her, the absence of pain that should have been there. She blinked, and the world came into focus. She was in a bed, a large, comfortable bed with thick blankets and pillows that smelled faintly of pine. The room around her was spacious and unfamiliar. Stone walls, a fireplace crackling in the corner, tall windows that let in pale winter sunlight. This wasn't Iron Ridge. This wasn't anywhere she recognized. Panic shot through her chest. Lyria tried to sit up, but her body protested, muscles weak and trembling, her head spinning with dizziness. She managed to prop herself up on her elbows, breathing hard, her heart racing. "Easy." A calm female voice came from somewhere to her left. "You're safe. Just breathe." Lyria's head snapped toward the voice. A woman stood near the fireplace, older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore simple clothes and radiated the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of knowing exactly who you were. "Who are you?" Lyria's voice came out rough and cracked, like she hadn't used it in days. "Dr. Iris Callan," the woman said, moving closer. "I'm the one who's been keeping you alive for the past 3 days." 3 days. Lyria's mind reeled. The last thing she remembered was the snow, the cold, the certainty that she was going to die alone in that frozen wasteland. "Where am I?" she asked. "Northridge Fortress," Iris said, "the seat of power for the Northern Territories. You're in the medical wing." Northern Territories. That was at least 100 miles from Iron Ridge. How had she... "How did I get here?" Iris pulled up a chair beside the bed and sat down, her movements deliberate and measured. "The High Alpha found you in Frost Pass during a blizzard. You were minutes from freezing to death. He brought you here." The High Alpha. Lyria's breath caught. Everyone in the wolf world knew about the High Alpha of the North, Riven Thorn, the most feared and powerful alpha in living memory. He ruled over a dozen packs, commanded an army of wolves, and had a reputation for crushing anyone who challenged his authority with ruthless efficiency. And he'd saved her? "Why?" Lyria whispered. "Why would he do that?" Iris's expression was unreadable. "That's a question you'll have to ask him yourself. But right now we need to talk about your condition." Lyria's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Iris leaned forward, her eyes sharp and assessing. "How long have you believed you were wolfless?" The question hit like a slap. Lyria's hands curled into the blankets. I don't have a wolf. I've never shifted, not once in 18 years." That's because someone didn't want you to, Iris said bluntly. You're not wolfless, Lyria. You never were. You were poisoned. The word hung in the air like a blade. What? Wolfsbane and silver nitrate, Iris continued, her tone clinical but not unkind, mixed into a compound designed to suppress your wolf. Based on the concentration levels in your blood, you've been ingesting this toxin for years, probably since you were a child. Lyria's world tilted. That's not possible. I would have known, not if it was given to you in small doses, hidden in your food, your water, your medicine. Iris's gaze was steady. Tell me, did you ever feel your wolf, even faintly? Lyria's throat tightened. In dreams, she admitted quietly. And sometimes when I was angry or scared, I'd feel something, like a shadow under my skin, but it never came out. I thought I was just imagining it. You weren't imagining anything, Iris said. Your wolf was there. She's always been there. Someone just made sure you couldn't reach her. Rage, hot and sudden, flooded through Lyria's chest. Who? Who would do that? That's what we're trying to figure out. But whoever it was, they didn't just want to suppress your wolf. They wanted to erase her completely, which tells me they were afraid of what you might become. Lyria shook her head, her hands trembling. I don't understand. I'm nobody. Just a wolfless girl from a small pack. Why would anyone be afraid of me? Iris was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Then she said, Do you know anything about your bloodline, your parents? They died when I was 6, Lyria said. A rogue attack. That's what the pack told me. And you believed them? Lyria hesitated. I never had a reason not to. Iris stood and walked to a table near the window. She picked up a vial filled with dark red liquid. Lyria's blood, she realized with a jolt, and held it up to the light. This, Iris said, is not the blood of a common wolf. The markers in your DNA suggest a royal lineage, old blood, powerful blood, the kind that hasn't been seen in over a century. Lyria's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. What are you saying? Iris turned to face her, and for the first time there was something almost like awe in her expression. I think you're a white wolf, Lyria. The words didn't make sense. Lyria had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. The white wolves were legends, mythical creatures said to be stronger, faster, and more powerful than any other wolf. They'd ruled the Northern Territory centuries ago before they were hunted to extinction during the Purge Wars. They were extinct. That's impossible, Lyria said, her voice barely a whisper. Is it? Iris challenged. Think about it. A royal bloodline that someone desperately wanted to suppress. Parents who died under suspicious circumstances. A pack that poisoned you for years to keep your wolf from surfacing. That's not the behavior of people protecting a wolfless girl. That's the behavior of people terrified of what she might become. Lyria's mind was spinning. She wanted to deny it, to laugh and say it was ridiculous, but the pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made terrible, horrible sense. If what you're saying is true, she said slowly, then Iron Ridge knew. They knew what I was, and they tried to kill me anyway. Not just Iron Ridge, Iris said. Whoever orchestrated this has been planning it for years. Your parents' deaths, the poisoning, the exile, it's all connected. Someone wanted to make sure the white wolves stayed extinct. Rage and grief and betrayal crashed over Lyria in waves. She thought of Sarah, her foster mother, who'd raised her with false kindness while feeding her poison. She thought of Declan, who'd exiled her with a smile on his face. She thought of every wolf who'd mocked her, pitied her, told her she was worthless. They'd known, all of them, and they'd let her believe she was broken. I want them to pay, Lyria said, her voice shaking with fury. I want every single one of them to pay for what they did. Good, a deep voice said from the doorway. So do I. Lyria's head snapped toward the sound. A man stood in the threshold, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He radiated power in a way that made the air itself seem heavier, and when his gaze locked onto hers, Lyria felt something inside her chest shift. Her wolf, silent and dormant for 18 years, suddenly surged to life, and she screamed, not out loud, inside, a howl that echoed through her mind, desperate and furious and awake. Lyria gasped, clutching at her chest, her vision going white at the edges. It felt like something was tearing through her, trying to claw its way to the surface. "What's happening?" she choked out. Iris was at her side in an instant, her hands firm on Lyria's shoulders. "Your wolf is recognizing her mate." "Her what?" But before Iris could answer, the man moved. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and dropped to his knees beside the bed, his hands hovering just above Lyria's arms like he was afraid to touch her. "Breathe," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Just breathe. I know it hurts, but you have to stay calm." Lyria looked at him, really looked, and felt the bond snap into place like a physical thing, invisible threads wrapping around her heart, pulling her toward this stranger with a force she couldn't fight. "You," she breathed. "You're Riven Thorn," he said, "High Alpha of the Northern Territories, and your mate." The word should have terrified her, should have sent her scrambling away from him, demanding answers, rejecting the bond that she didn't ask for and didn't want. But all Lyria felt was a bone-deep certainty that he was telling the truth, and the strangest, most overwhelming sense of relief, because for the first time in her entire life, she wasn't alone. "I don't understand," she whispered. Riven's expression softened, just slightly. "I know. And I'll explain everything. But first, we need to deal with the toxin in your system. Your wolf is trying to surface, but the poison is still suppressing her. If we don't flush it out soon, the conflict could tear you apart." "How do we do that?" "Detox," Iris said grimly. "It's going to be brutal, painful. There's a chance your body won't survive the process. And if I don't do it, then you stay like this," Riven said. "Half alive, half wolf, never knowing your full strength." Lyria looked between them, her mind racing. She thought about Iron Ridge, about Declan's smug face as he exiled her, about Marcus laughing as they dumped her in the snow to die. She thought about 18 years of being told she was worthless. And she made her decision. "Do it," she said. "Whatever it takes. I want my wolf back." Riven's eyes flashed with something fierce and approving. "Then we start tonight." The detox began at sunset. Iris had prepared a room in the lower levels of the fortress, a space with reinforced walls and a door that locked from the outside. It looked like a cell, and Lyria supposed that's exactly what it was. "You'll need to be restrained," Iris explained as she led Lyria down the stone corridor. Riven walked on Lyria's other side, his presence a constant, looming force. "When the toxin starts purging from your system, your wolf is going to fight for control. If you're not contained, you could hurt yourself, or others." Lyria nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Fear was starting to creep in now, cold and insidious. She had no idea what she was walking into, no frame of reference for what brutal actually meant, but she'd already made her choice. The room was sparse, just a cot bolted to the floor and thick leather restraints attached to the walls. Lyria's stomach turned at the sight, but she forced herself to walk inside. "How long will this take?" she asked. "Days," Iris said. "Maybe a week. It depends on how strong your wolf is and how much poison is still in your system." "And what do I do?" "Survive," Riven said quietly. Lyria looked at him, and something in his expression made her chest ache. He looked like a man preparing to watch someone he cared about walk into hell. Which, she supposed, he was. "I'll be here," he added. "The entire time. You won't be alone." Lyria wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't need to do that she wasn't his responsibility. But the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, the thought of going through this alone terrified her. "Okay," she whispered. Iris gestured to the cot. "Lie down. I'm going to give you an injection to accelerate the purge. Once it starts, there's no stopping it." Lyria obeyed, her hands shaking as she lay back against the thin mattress. Iris secured the restraints around her wrists and ankles, tight enough to hold, but not tight enough to cut off circulation. "Last chance to change your mind," Iris said, holding up a syringe filled with amber liquid. Lyria met Riven's gaze. He was standing near the door, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. But his eyes, those storm gray eyes, were steady and unwavering. She could do this. She would do this. "Do it," Lyria said. Iris injected the serum into her arm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pain hit. It started in her chest, a burning, twisting agony that felt like her ribs were cracking open from the inside. Lyria screamed, her back arching off the cot, her hands pulling against the restraints hard enough to make the leather creak. "It's starting," Iris said, her voice clinical and distant. "Her body is fighting the poison." The burning spread down her arms, into her legs, up her spine. It felt like her blood was boiling, like every nerve ending in her body was on fire. Lyria thrashed, gasping for air, her vision going red at the edges. And then she felt it. Her wolf. Not a shadow anymore, not a whisper, a roar. Her wolf surged forward, clawing at the walls of the prison that had held her for 18 years. Lyria could feel her, wild and furious and desperate to be free. But the poison was still there, still holding her back, still trying to smother her. The two forces collided inside Lyria's chest, and she screamed. "Hold her down!" Iris shouted. Riven was there in an instant, his hands on her shoulders, his weight pressing her into the cot. His touch should have made it worse, but instead, it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I've got you," he said, his voice cutting through the pain. "I'm right here. You're not alone." Lyria's eyes snapped open, locking onto his. Sweat poured down her face, her entire body trembling with the effort of staying conscious. "It hurts," she gasped. "I know." "I can't." "Yes, you can." His grip tightened. "You're stronger than this, stronger than the poison, stronger than the people who tried to break you. So fight." And Lyria did. She fought through the pain, through the fear, through the voice in her head that screamed at her to give up. She focused on Riven's voice, on the steady rhythm of his breathing, on the bond between them that thrummed like a heartbeat. Hours passed, maybe days. Time lost all meaning. But slowly, agonizingly slowly, the burning started to fade, and her wolf started to win. By the 7th day, Lyria's screams had stopped. That should have been a relief. Instead, it terrified everyone in the fortress. Riven stood outside the reinforced door, his hands braced against the frame, listening to the silence on the other side. For 6 days straight, he'd heard her agony. The screams, the sobs, the animal sounds of a wolf trying to claw its way through poison and pain. He'd sat with her through every moment of it, holding her down when the convulsions got too violent, talking her through the worst of the hallucinations, refusing to leave even when Iris insisted he needed rest. But now there was nothing, just silence. "She's either broken through," Cade said quietly from behind him, "or she's dying." Riven's wolf snarled at the second option, rejecting it with every fiber of his being. "She's not dying. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Riven turned to face his beta, and the certainty in his voice left no room for argument. "I'd feel it if she was gone. The bond would break. She's alive in there." Cade nodded slowly, though his expression remained troubled. "The council is getting restless. They want answers about who she is and why you've locked yourself away for a week. Marcus Kane showed up this morning demanding an audience." Riven's eyes flashed dangerously. "Marcus Kane? From Iron Ridge?" "The same. He claims he's here on official pack business, but I don't trust him. He's got 3 enforcers with him, and they're asking too many questions about a girl matching Lyria's description." Every muscle in Riven's body went rigid. "They're here for her." "That's my guess. Whatever Iron Ridge did to her, they want to make sure it stays buried." Riven's horns curled into fists, his wolf pushing against his control with murderous intent. Iron Ridge. The pack that had poisoned his mate for 18 years exiled her and left her to die in a frozen wasteland. And now they had the audacity to come to his territory and demand her return? "Where are they now?" Riven asked, his voice deadly calm. "Guest quarters in the East Wing. I told them you were in council meetings and couldn't be disturbed." "Good. Keep them there. And put guards on this door. No one gets in or out without my direct permission." "Done. But Riven, if they're here for her, they're not going to leave quietly. Iron Ridge may not be as powerful as the Northern Packs, but they've got allies. If you refuse to hand her over, it could start a war." "Let it," Riven said flatly. "They tried to murder my mate. If they want a war over that, I'll give them one they'll never forget." Cade studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." As Cade walked away, Riven turned back to the door. He pressed his palm against the cold steel, reaching out through the mate bond, searching for any sign of her, and then he felt it, a pulse, faint but growing stronger. Not pain this time, something else, something raw and wild and powerful. Riven's breath caught. "Iris!" he shouted. The healer appeared within seconds, her medical bag already in hand. She took one look at Riven's face and immediately moved to unlock the door. She's waking up," Riven said. "I can feel it." Iris's eyes widened. Then she nodded and pulled out her keys. The locks clicked open one by one, and Riven shoved the door wide. The room was dark except for a single lamp in the corner. Lyria lay on the cot, her wrists and ankles still bound by the leather restraints, her body perfectly still. But her eyes were open, and they were glowing, not the warm brown they'd been before. Now they burned with an inner light, silver white, like moonlight on fresh snow, the color of a wolf staring out from behind human eyes. Riven's wolf howled in recognition and triumph. "Lyria," he said quietly, moving closer. Her head turned toward him, the movement slow and deliberate. When she spoke, her voice was different, layered, as if two beings were speaking at once. "She's here," Lyria whispered. "My wolf. She's really here." Iris rushed forward, checking Lyria's vitals with practiced efficiency. Pulse is strong, temperature normal, pupils responsive. The toxin levels in her blood should be almost gone by now. She looked up at Riven, and there was wonder in her expression. She survived it. She actually survived. "Of course she did," Riven said, his voice rough with emotion. "She's stronger than all of them combined." Lyria's glowing eyes locked onto his. "I can feel her. Inside me. She's been clawing at the walls for so long, and now—" Her voice broke. "Now she's free." "Can you shift?" Iris asked gently. Lyria's expression shifted to uncertainty. "I don't know. I've never—" "You have," Riven interrupted. "Your wolf knows how. You just have to trust her." Iris began unbuckling the restraints. The moment Lyria's hands were free, she sat up, her movements careful and tentative like she was learning to use her body all over again. She looked down at her hands, turning them over, and Riven could see the subtle changes already taking place. Her nails had sharpened slightly, her muscles more defined, her entire presence radiating a strength that hadn't been there before. "It feels strange," Lyria said softly. "Like I'm seeing the world for the first time." "That's because you are," Iris said. "Your wolf's senses are enhancing everything. Sight, smell, hearing, it's all sharper now." Lyria closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "I can smell the pine trees outside, the snow, and—" Her eyes snapped open, focusing on Riven. You smell like smoke and cedar and something else. Something that makes my wolf want to—" She cut herself off, her cheeks flushing. Riven's mouth curved into a small smile despite the tension. "That's the mate bond. Your wolf recognizes me. It's intense. It gets easier to manage, eventually." Lyria stood on shaking legs, and both Riven and Iris moved to steady her. But she waved them off, determination setting her jaw. "I need to try. To shift. If I don't do it now, I might lose my nerve." "The first shift is always the hardest," Iris warned. "It's going to hurt. Your bones will break and reform, your muscles will tear and rebuild, but once you get through it, the pain lessens each time." Lyria nodded, her hands trembling. "What do I do?" "Stop thinking like a human," Riven said. "Let your wolf take control. Trust her to know what to do." Lyria took a deep breath and closed her eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then her body began to tremble, not from fear, but from the power building inside her. Riven could feel it through the bond, a storm gathering strength. And then she shifted. The transformation was violent and beautiful all at once. Lyria's body convulsed, her spine arching as bones cracked and reformed. She cried out, a sound that morphed mid-scream into a howl. Her skin rippled, fur exploding across her body in a wave of pure white. Within seconds, where Lyria had stood, there was now a wolf. But not just any wolf. Riven had seen thousands of wolves in his lifetime. He'd fought beside some of the most powerful alphas in the territories, but he had never seen anything like this. Lyria's wolf was massive, nearly as large as his own, which was unheard of for a female. Her fur was pure white, so bright it almost seemed to glow in the dim light. Her eyes remained that eerie silver color, intelligent and ancient and utterly wild. Power radiated from her in waves, making the air itself feel heavy. Iris took an involuntary step back. Sweet, merciful, a white wolf, Riven finished, awe coloring his voice. The legends were true. Lyria's wolf turned her massive head toward him, and for a moment Riven saw the recognition in those silver eyes. Then she threw back her head and howled. The sound was primal and powerful, echoing through the fortress with enough force to make the walls tremble. Every wolf in the building would have heard it. Every wolf would know that something had just changed. Somewhere in the East Wing, Marcus Kane and his enforcers would be hearing that howl, and they would know exactly who it belonged to. Riven shifted in response, his own massive black wolf emerging in a fluid transformation. He moved to stand beside Lyria, their shoulders nearly touching, and howled with her. The message was clear. She belongs to me now. And if you want her, you'll have to go through me first. Marcus Kane had been a loyal soldier of Iron Ridge for 30 years. He'd carried out every order Declan Voss had given him without question, including the order to dump a wolfless girl in Frost Pass and leave her to die. It had been a simple job, quick and clean. Except apparently, it hadn't been clean enough. Marcus stood in the guest quarters of Northridge Fortress, his hands clenched into fists as that howl echoed through the building. He knew that sound. Every wolf knew that sound. It was the howl of a dominant, powerful predator announcing their presence. But it was the quality of the howl that made his blood run cold. Ancient, otherworldly, wrong. "That's her," one of his enforcers, a young wolf named Derek, said, his face pale. "That's the girl we dumped in the pass. She's alive." "Impossible," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She was dying. There's no way she survived a week in those mountains." "Then what was that?" Derek demanded. "Because that didn't sound like any normal wolf." Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd known something was off about Lyria Hale from the beginning. The way the council had insisted on keeping her weak, on hiding her true heritage, on making sure her wolf never surfaced. He'd always assumed it was just pack politics, some old grudge against her bloodline. But now, hearing that howl, he realized the truth was far worse. They hadn't been suppressing a weak wolf. They'd been suppressing a weapon. "We need to report back to Alpha Declan," Marcus said, already moving toward the door. "Now!" But before he could reach it, it swung open. A man stood in the threshold, tall, blond, with amber eyes that missed nothing. Marcus recognized him immediately. Cade Brennan, Beta of the Northern Territories. "Going somewhere?" Cade asked mildly. Marcus straightened, forcing his expression into neutrality. "We were just coming to find you. We need to speak with the High Alpha." "I'm sure you do." "Unfortunately, the High Alpha is busy at the moment. This is urgent pack business." "Is it?" Cade's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to leave without permission, which would be incredibly rude considering you're guests in our territory." Marcus's wolf bristled at the implied threat. "We came here in good faith. You came here hunting for a girl you tried to murder," Cade interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "A girl who happens to be the High Alpha's mate. So let's dispense with the pleasantries, shall we? You're not leaving this fortress until the High Alpha decides what to do with you. And if I were you, I'd start praying he's feeling merciful." Derek stepped forward, his hand moving toward the weapon at his belt. "You can't hold us here. We're protected under territory law." Cade moved so fast Marcus barely saw it. One moment he was standing in the doorway. The next, he had Derek pinned against the wall with one hand around his throat. "Territory law," Cade said conversationally, "states that any wolf who attempts harm against an alpha's mate forfeits all protections and can be executed on sight. So please go ahead and reach for that weapon. Give me an excuse." Derek froze, his face turning purple. Marcus forced himself to remain calm. "We didn't know she was his mate. And that makes attempted murder acceptable?" "We were following orders from our Alpha." "Then your Alpha is going to have to answer for those orders." Cade released Derek, who crumpled to the floor, gasping. "But until that conversation happens, you're staying right here. Guards! Two massive wolves appeared in the hallway, enforcers from Riven's personal security detail. They looked at Marcus and his men like they were prey. Escort our guests to the holding cells, Cade said, and make sure they're comfortable. We wouldn't want them to think we're being inhospitable. Marcus wanted to fight, wanted to shift and tear his way out of this fortress and run back to Iron Ridge to warn Declan that everything had gone wrong. But he was outnumbered, outmatched, and in hostile territory, so he went quietly, for now. Lyria shifted back to human form just as dawn broke over the mountains. The transformation back was easier than the first shift, less painful, more natural. One moment she was a wolf, and the next she was kneeling naked on the floor of the training room where Riven had brought her to run through the shift multiple times. Iris immediately wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. How do you feel? Lyria looked down at her hands, normal again, no claws, and flexed her fingers experimentally. Strong, she said, and there was wonder in her voice. I feel strong, like I could run for miles and never get tired, like I could fight and actually win. That's your wolf, Riven said from where he leaned against the wall, fully dressed again in dark pants and a fitted shirt. He'd shifted back and forth with her a dozen times over the past few hours, coaching her through the transitions, teaching her to control the change. She's been locked away for so long, she's eager to make up for lost time. Lyria stood, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. I can feel her now, all the time, like she's always been there, but now we're actually connected. Is it always like this? You'll learn to separate your thoughts from hers eventually, Iris said. But the bond between human and wolf is permanent. You're two parts of the same whole. Lyria closed her eyes, reaching inward. Her wolf was there, awake and aware, a constant presence in her mind. She could feel the animal's strength, its instincts, its fierce protectiveness toward the man standing across the room. Her mate. The word still felt surreal. She barely knew Riven Thorn, didn't know his favorite food or what made him laugh or whether he was a morning person. But the bond between them was undeniable, a pull so strong it made her chest ache every time she looked at him. I need to talk to you, she said, meeting his gaze, about Iron Ridge, about what they did. Riven straightened. Iris, give us a moment. The healer nodded and left the room, closing the door quietly behind her. Silence stretched between them. Lyria could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the pine and smoke scent that clung to Riven, could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on her shoulders. They knew, she said finally. Didn't they? About what I was. Yes. The confirmation hit like a physical blow, even though she'd already known the truth. How long? Based on when the poisoning started. Probably since you were born. Riven moved closer, his movements careful, like he was approaching a wild animal. The white wolves were hunted to extinction over a century ago because the other packs feared their power. If someone in Iron Ridge discovered you carried that bloodline, they would have seen you as a threat, something to be controlled or eliminated. My parents, Lyria whispered. They said it was a rogue attack, but it wasn't, was it? Probably not. The rage that flared in her chest was hot and immediate. Her wolf snarled, demanding blood, demanding justice for the parents she barely remembered. I want to go back, Lyria said, her voice shaking. I want to make them pay for what they did. You will, Riven said. But not yet. You're strong, Lyria, but you're still new to this. You've had your wolf for less than a day. If you go back to Iron Ridge now, they'll kill you. Then teach me, she said fiercely. Teach me to fight. Teach me to be the weapon they were afraid I'd become. I don't care how long it takes. I'm not going to let them get away with this. Riven studied her for a long moment, something like pride flickering in his gray eyes. All right, but you need to understand something first. The moment Iron Ridge finds out you're alive and that your wolf has awakened, they're going to come after you with everything they have. And they won't come alone. They'll call in allies, make deals, spread lies, whatever it takes to justify killing you. If you walk this path, there's no going back. You'll be declaring war. Good, Lyria said, because they started this war 18 years ago when they poisoned a child. I'm just going to finish it. Riven's mouth curved into a dangerous smile. Then we have work to do. For the next 3 weeks, Lyria trained like her life depended on it. Because it did. Riven was a brutal teacher. He pushed her past exhaustion, past pain, past every limit she thought she had. They started before dawn and didn't stop until long after dark, shifting, running, fighting, learning to use her wolf's strength, speed, and senses in combat. Lyria threw herself into it with single-minded determination. Every bruise, every aching muscle, every moment she wanted to quit and couldn't, it all fueled the fire burning in her chest. Iron Ridge had tried to break her. Now she was going to break them. Again, Riven barked from across the training yard. Lyria was in wolf form, panting heavily, her white fur matted with snow and sweat. They'd been sparring for 2 hours straight, and her entire body screamed for rest. But she lunged anyway. Riven met her mid-leap, his massive black wolf slamming into her with enough force to send them both tumbling across the frozen ground. They grappled, claws and teeth in snarling fury, until Riven pinned her, his jaws inches from her throat. "Dead," he said, shifting back to human. "That's the 3rd time today I've had a kill shot." Lyria shifted as well, gasping for breath. "I'm trying—" "You're thinking," Riven interrupted. "You're still fighting like a human trying to control a wolf. You need to let your wolf lead, trust her instincts." "My instincts tell me to go for your throat." "Then do it." Lyria blinked. "What?" Riven stood and offered her a hand up. "Your wolf wants to challenge me. I can feel it through the bond. So stop holding back and actually fight me like you mean it." Something dangerous flickered in Lyria's chest. Her wolf had been restless for days, frustrated by the constant losing, eager to prove herself against the most powerful alpha in the territories. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure." "Shift." Lyria didn't need to be told twice. She let her wolf surge forward, the transformation happening in a heartbeat. And this time, when she lunged, she didn't hold back. She went straight for Riven's throat. He dodged, barely. And the fight that followed was nothing like their previous sparring sessions. This was real, vicious. Lyria used every dirty trick she'd learned, every advantage her wolf's speed gave her. She was smaller than Riven, but faster, and she used that speed to stay just out of reach of his killing blows while landing strikes of her own. For the first time, she saw surprise flicker in his eyes, and then she saw something else: respect. They fought until they were both bleeding, both exhausted, both too stubborn to call a halt. Finally, Lyria managed to hook her claws into Riven's shoulder and use his own momentum to throw him off balance. He went down hard, and she was on him in an instant, jaws locked around his throat, not hard enough to break skin, but enough to prove the point. If this had been real, she would have won. Riven shifted beneath her, and suddenly it wasn't a wolf she was pinning, but a man. His hands came up to grip her fur, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been pride. "There she is," he said softly. "The white wolf the legends warned about." Lyria shifted back, suddenly very aware that she was straddling his chest, both of them naked and breathing hard. She scrambled back, heat flooding her cheeks. "I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize," Riven said, sitting up. There was a cut above his eye and claw marks on his shoulder, but he was smiling, actually smiling. "That's the first time you fought like you believed you could win." "I got lucky." "You got good." He stood and offered her a hand again. This time Lyria took it. "You're ready." "Ready for what?" Riven's expression turned serious. "Iron Ridge sent an envoy 3 weeks ago. Marcus Kane and 3 enforcers. They're currently in our holding cells, but their pack will be expecting them to return. When they don't, Alpha Declan is going to know something went wrong." Lyria's blood went cold. "Marcus is here?" "He was the one who dumped you in Frost Pass, wasn't he?" "Yes." "Good. Then we're going to have a conversation with him. And he's going to tell us everything we need to know about Iron Ridge's plans." Lyria's wolf snarled with anticipation. "When? Now, or—" The holding cells beneath Northridge Fortress were carved directly into the mountain, cold, dark, and escape-proof. Marcus Kane sat in the largest cell, his hands chained to the wall, his face bruised from the beating he'd received when he tried to shift and break free. He looked up when the door opened, and his eyes went wide, because standing in the doorway was the girl he'd left to die. Except she wasn't a broken, wolfless child anymore. Lyria stood beside the High Alpha, dressed in fitted black clothes that highlighted her new strength, her eyes burning with that eerie silver light. Power radiated from her in waves, and Marcus's wolf whimpered in recognition of a predator far more dangerous than anything he'd ever encountered. "Hello, Marcus," Lyria said, her voice calm and cold. "Remember me?" Marcus's mouth went dry. "You're supposed to be dead." "I was supposed to be a lot of things," Lyria said, stepping into the cell. "Wolfless, weak, easy to erase. But you made a mistake. You dumped me in the High Alpha's territory. And now I'm very much alive, and very interested in hearing you explain why Iron Ridge has been poisoning me since I was 6 years old." "I don't know what you're talking about." Riven moved so fast Marcus didn't see it coming. One moment the High Alpha was standing in the doorway. The next, he had Marcus pinned against the wall by his throat. "Let's try that again," Riven said pleasantly. "And this time, don't lie to my mate. It makes me angry." Marcus gasped for air, clawing at Riven's hand. "I was following orders." "Whose orders?" "Alpha Declan." "And who gave him orders?" Marcus hesitated, and Riven's grip tightened until spots danced in his vision. "The Council," Marcus choked out. "The old Council. They're the ones who knew about her bloodline. They ordered the poisoning. Declan just carried it out when he became Alpha." Riven released him, and Marcus collapsed to the floor, coughing. Lyria crouched down to his level, her silver eyes boring into him. "Why? Why go through all that trouble instead of just killing me outright?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "Because they needed to be sure. The White Wolves, they're not just powerful, they're prophesied. Old texts say that if a white wolf ever rises again, they'll unite the packs and overthrow the current order. The Council was terrified of that. So they kept you alive but suppressed, just in case the prophecy was real. Better to have you under control than risk you becoming a martyr." Lyria's hands clenched into fists. "And my parents? Killed on the Council's orders. They refused to let the pack suppress your wolf, so the Council staged a rogue attack and eliminated the problem." The rage that exploded through Lyria was white-hot and all-consuming. Her wolf roared, demanding blood, demanding she tear Marcus apart piece by piece for what he'd just admitted. But Riven's hand landed on her shoulder, grounding her. "Not yet," he said quietly. "We need him to deliver a message first." Lyria forced herself to breathe, to pull back from the edge. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. "What message?" Riven looked at Marcus with eyes like winter storms. "You're going to go back to Iron Ridge, and you're going to tell Alpha Declan that Lyria Hale is alive, that her wolf has awakened, and that if he wants to avoid a war, he'll present himself and his entire council to me at the Winter Summit in 2 weeks to answer for attempted murder and treason." Marcus's face went pale. "He'll never agree to that." "Then there will be war," Riven said simply. "Either way, Iron Ridge's days of hiding behind lies and poison are over." Marcus stared at him in horror. "You're insane. Do you have any idea how many allies Iron Ridge has? If you go after them, half the southern packs will come to their aid." "Let them." Riven's smile was all teeth. "I've been looking for an excuse to clean house anyway." He gestured to the guards, who immediately moved to unchain Marcus. "You have 24 hours to get back to Iron Ridge," Riven said. "After that, if Declan hasn't responded, I'm going to assume he's chosen war, and I'll act accordingly." Marcus was hauled to his feet and dragged toward the door. But before he left, he looked back at Lyria one last time. "You should have stayed dead," he said. Lyria's smile was sharp and dangerous. "Probably, but then I wouldn't get to watch you all burn." The door slammed shut behind him. Lyria stood in the empty cell, her heart pounding, her wolf howling with barely contained fury. Everything she'd believed about her life had been a lie. Her parents hadn't died in a random attack. They'd been murdered. She hadn't been born broken. She'd been systematically destroyed. And now, for the first time in 18 years, she had the power to fight back. "Are you all right?" Riven asked quietly. Lyria looked at him. This man she barely knew but was bound to by forces neither of them controlled. He'd saved her life, given her back her wolf, and now he was offering her something even more valuable: vengeance. "No," she said honestly, "but I will be. Once Iron Ridge pays for what they did." Riven nodded. "Then we prepare for war." But neither of them knew that Marcus Kane wouldn't make it back to Iron Ridge. Because 3 miles outside Northridge territory, his truck would be ambushed by wolves who didn't belong to any pack Lyria or Riven knew. Wolves who had been watching, waiting. Wolves who had their own plans for the last white wolf. And when Marcus's broken body was found the next morning, it would carry a message carved into his chest. She belongs to us. The news reached Northridge Fortress at dawn. Lyria was in the training yard running through combat drills with Cade when she heard the commotion at the gates. Wolves were shouting, guards scrambling, and beneath it all was a sound she'd come to recognize over the past 3 weeks, Riven's voice cold and deadly. She shifted mid-stride, her white wolf form eating up the distance to the main courtyard in seconds. What she found there made her blood run cold. Marcus Kane's body lay sprawled across the stone, brought in on a stretcher by 2 scouts. His throat had been torn out, his chest carved with words that looked like they'd been written with claws. Lyria shifted back to human, ignoring the cold bite of morning air against her bare skin as someone tossed her a cloak. "What happened?" she demanded. Riven stood over the body, his face a mask of controlled fury. When he looked up at her, his gray eyes were storm dark. "Someone ambushed him 3 miles outside our territory, killed him, and left this." He gestured to Marcus's chest, and Lyria stepped closer to read the message carved into dead flesh. "She belongs to us." Ice flooded her veins. Who? Who would? "I don't know," Riven said, and the admission clearly cost him. "But they knew about you. Knew you were alive. Knew enough to intercept Marcus before he could reach Iron Ridge." Cade appeared at Lyria's side, his expression grim. "The scouts found tracks. At least 6 wolves. Maybe more. They covered their scent with mountain ash, so we can't identify their pack. But whoever they are, they're professionals. This wasn't a random attack." Lyria stared at the message, her mind racing. She'd spent 3 weeks preparing for war with Iron Ridge, learning to fight, building her strength. But she'd never considered that there might be other players in this game. Other wolves who knew what she was and wanted to claim her for themselves. "The Winter Summit," she said slowly. "It's in 12 days. Every major alpha in the northern and southern territories will be there." Riven's jaw tightened. "Which means whoever did this will be there too, watching, waiting for their next move." "Then we use that," Lyria said, an idea forming. "We don't hide. We go to the summit and we make a statement so loud that Iron Ridge and whoever killed Marcus will have no choice but to face us directly." "That's dangerous," Cade warned. "You'll be exposed, vulnerable. If there are wolves out there hunting you, then they'll learn I'm not prey," Lyria interrupted, her voice sharp. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. If they want me, they can try to take me in front of every alpha in the territories. Let's see how bold they are when the entire wolf world is watching." Riven studied her for a long moment, and Lyria could feel the bond between them thrumming with tension. He didn't want to put her at risk. Every instinct he had as an alpha and a mate was screaming at him to lock her away somewhere safe until they'd identified the threat. But he also knew she was right. "All right," he said finally. "We go to the summit, but we do it my way. Cade, I want triple security, every wolf in our pack on high alert. And I want intelligence gathered on every alpha attending, financial records, territorial disputes, old grudges. If someone's planning to move against Lyria, I want to know about it before they make their play." Cade nodded. "I'll get it done." As the beta walked away, barking orders to the gathered wolves, Riven turned to Lyria. His hand came up to cup her face, the gesture surprisingly gentle for someone who'd just been staring at a mutilated corpse. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we walk into that summit together, there's no hiding what you are. Every wolf there will know you're a white wolf, and some of them won't react well." Lyria leaned into his touch, drawing strength from the mate bond that had become as natural as breathing over the past weeks. "I'm sure. Iron Ridge took everything from me, my parents, my wolf, my childhood. I won't let whoever did this take my future too." Riven's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Then we show them what happens when you back a white wolf into a corner." His smile was sharp and dangerous, and Lyria felt her own wolf rise to meet it. Let them come. She was ready. The Winter Summit was held in Silverstone Hall, a massive fortress built into the mountains at the border between northern and southern territories. It was neutral ground claimed by no pack, protected by ancient laws that forbade violence within its walls. Once a year, every major alpha gathered here to discuss territory disputes, form alliances, and address threats to the wolf world as a whole. Lyria had never been to a summit before. Iron Ridge had never allowed her to attend, claiming she was too weak to represent the pack. Now, as their convoy of vehicles wound up the mountain road toward Silverstone, she understood why they'd really kept her away. Because this wasn't just a political gathering, it was a display of power. Hundreds of wolves packed the grounds around the hall, enforcers, betas, advisors, all of them radiating strength and dominance. Lyria could feel their eyes tracking the convoy as Riven's vehicles pulled up to the main entrance. She sat in the lead car with Riven and Cade, dressed in fitted black pants and a deep gray shirt that made her silver eyes stand out like beacons. "They're all staring," she murmured. "They're always staring at Summit," Riven said, "but today they have a better reason. Word's already spread that I'm bringing someone. They're curious." "Curious is putting it mildly," Cade added from the driver's seat. "Half the alphas here have been trying to broker alliances with you for years, Riven. Showing up with a mate, especially one they've never heard of, is going to cause chaos." "Good," Riven said. "Let them talk. The more they're focused on gossip, the less they'll be focused on making trouble." The car stopped, and Riven exited first. Immediately, wolves turned to look, dominant alphas who commanded respect through sheer presence. But when Riven extended his hand back into the car, and Lyria took it, stepping out beside him, the entire courtyard went silent. Lyria felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, assessing, judging, calculating. Her wolf bristled under the scrutiny, wanting to snarl and show teeth. But she kept her expression calm, her shoulders back, her chin high. She belonged here. She had every right to stand beside the high alpha, and anyone who thought otherwise could challenge her directly. "That's her," someone whispered, the words carrying on the cold mountain air. "That's the girl from Iron Ridge. I heard she was wolfless. Look at her eyes. She's too young to be his mate." The whispers cut off abruptly as another car pulled up behind theirs. Lyria didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She could smell them, the scent of pine and old blood that she'd grown up with, that had once meant home. Iron Ridge had arrived. Alpha Declan Voss stepped out of his vehicle, flanked by 6 enforcers. He looked exactly as Lyria remembered, tall, blonde, coldly handsome, with pale blue eyes that had always made her feel like an insect under a microscope. Those eyes found her now, and Lyria watched shock, then fury, then something like fear flash across his face. "Lyria," he said, and his voice was too loud, too sharp. "You're alive." "Disappointed?" Lyria asked coolly. Declan's jaw tightened. His gaze shifted to Riven, and Lyria could see him recalculating, trying to figure out how this had happened. "Hi, Alpha. I wasn't aware you'd taken a mate." "There are a lot of things you're not aware of, Voss," Riven said, his tone glacial. "Like the fact that attempting to murder my mate is considered an act of war in the Northern Territories." The courtyard had gone so quiet, Lyria could hear the wind rustling through the pine trees. Every wolf present was now openly staring, sensing blood in the water. Declan's expression smoothed into something diplomatic. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Lyria Hale was exiled from Iron Ridge for failing to produce a wolf. What happened to her after she left our territory is not our concern." "You dumped her in Frost Pass during a blizzard," Riven said flatly. "That's not exile. That's execution." "I gave her a chance to survive on her own." "You gave her nothing," Lyria interrupted, her voice cutting through Declan's excuses like a blade. "You and your council poisoned me for 18 years to suppress my wolf. You murdered my parents when they tried to stop you, and when the poison finally failed and you couldn't hide what I was anymore, you tried to finish the job by leaving me to freeze to death." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alphas were stepping closer now, drawn by the accusation. Poisoning a pack member, especially a child, was one of the most heinous crimes in wolf law. If Lyria could prove it, Declan would lose everything. "That's a serious accusation," one of the other alphas said, a woman with dark skin and intelligent eyes who Lyria didn't recognize. "Do you have proof?" Lyria reached into her pocket and pulled out a vial of her own blood. Iris had drawn it before they left, preserving the trace amounts of toxins still in her system. "My blood contains wolfsbane and silver nitrate at concentrations consistent with years of systematic poisoning. Dr. Iris Callan can testify to that. And I'm sure if you search Iron Ridge's medical records, you'll find purchase orders for those exact compounds. Declan's face had gone pale. This is absurd, is it? Another alpha stepped forward, an older man with silver hair and scars crossing his face. Lyria recognized him from Riven's briefings. Alpha Garrett of the Stoneclaw Pack, one of the most respected leaders in the Southern Territories. Because I remember the stories my grandfather used to tell about the White Wolves, about how the old packs hunted them to extinction because they feared their power. And looking at this girl, at those eyes, I'm starting to wonder if Iron Ridge had a very good reason to keep her suppressed. She's not a white wolf, Declan said quickly. Too quickly. The white wolves are extinct. Then you won't mind if she proves you wrong, Riven said. His hand settled on Lyria's lower back, a gesture of support and possession. Shift for them. Lyria's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment that would change everything. If she shifted here, in front of every major alpha in the territories, there would be no hiding what she was, no going back to anonymity. But she'd already made her choice. She stepped away from Riven into the center of the courtyard. Wolves pressed closer, forming a circle around her. She could feel their anticipation, their skepticism, their hunger for something dramatic. She'd give them dramatic. Lyria closed her eyes and let her wolf rise. The shift happened faster than it ever had before, fueled by adrenaline and rage and the fierce need to prove them all wrong. Her bones cracked and reformed, her body exploding outward into something massive and powerful and utterly wild. When she opened her eyes again, the world had shifted into sharper focus. She could smell everything: fear, awe, aggression, arousal, could hear heartbeats racing, breath catching, could see the exact moment when every wolf present realized what they were looking at. A white wolf. Pure as fresh snow, massive as a male alpha, with eyes that glowed like molten silver. The silence that followed was absolute. Then someone, Lyria couldn't see who, whispered, "Merciful moon." And the floodgates opened. Wolves started talking all at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of disbelief and wonder. Lyria stood in the center of it all, her white fur gleaming in the winter sunlight, and let them stare. Let them understand that the legends they'd dismissed as myth were standing right in front of them. She shifted back to human, and someone immediately threw a cloak around her shoulders. She pulled it tight and walked back to Riven's side, her chin high. "Still think she's not a white wolf, Voss?" Riven asked mildly. Declan looked like he'd been punched in the gut. His enforcers had backed away from him, their faces pale, clearly realizing they'd just been exposed for trying to kill someone far more powerful than they'd ever imagined. "This changes nothing," Declan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She was exiled legally." "Under false pretenses," Alpha Garrett interrupted. "You exiled her for being wolfless when you knew she wasn't. You poisoned her to keep her wolf suppressed, which violates about a dozen pack laws. And then you attempted to murder her to cover it up." He looked at Riven. "High Alpha, what punishment does the Northern law prescribe for these crimes?" "Death," Riven said simply, "or exile and the seizure of all pack lands and titles." Declan's face flushed with anger. "You can't do this. Iron Ridge has stood for 3 centuries. Under leadership that just committed treason," Riven said. "The question now is whether you face trial here, in front of the Council of Alphas, or whether you'd prefer trial by combat." The challenge hung in the air like a blade. Trial by combat was an old law, rarely invoked, but still binding. If Declan chose combat, he would fight to defend his honor and his pack's right to exist. If he lost, Iron Ridge would be absorbed into the victor's territory. If he won, all charges would be dismissed. Lyria saw the calculation in Declan's eyes. He was a strong alpha, experienced, well-trained, ruthless. But he'd also just watched her shift into a white wolf, had seen the proof of power he'd spent 18 years trying to suppress. He was afraid of her, and that fear made him dangerous. "I choose combat," Declan said, "but not against the High Alpha." His gaze locked onto Lyria, and his smile was pure malice. "I choose to fight her. If she's so powerful, let her prove it." The crowd erupted. Wolves shouted arguments, some supporting the challenge, others calling it cowardice. But Lyria barely heard them. All her focus had narrowed to Declan, the man who'd exiled her, who'd stood by while she was poisoned and broken and left to die. I accept, she said clearly. Lyria, Riven's hand closed around her arm, pulling her aside. His voice was low and urgent. You don't have to do this. He's baiting you. Let me fight him. No, Lyria said firmly. This is my fight. He destroyed my life. I'm going to be the one who ends his. You've only had your wolf for 3 weeks. And he's had his for 25 years while I was being poisoned, Lyria finished. I know the odds, Riven, but I also know that if I don't do this, I'll never truly be free of what he did to me. I need this. Riven stared at her, and she could feel his wolf raging through the bond, desperate to protect her, to fight this battle for her. But he also understood. Because he was an alpha, and alphas knew that some battles had to be fought alone. Then you fight smart, he said finally. He's bigger and more experienced, but you're faster. Use that. And remember, I know, Lyria interrupted, touching his face. Trust my wolf. Riven pulled her into a fierce kiss, and when he released her, his eyes were blazing. Destroy him. Lyria turned back to the circle. The Council of Alphas had already declared the challenge valid and set the terms. Combat in wolf form, no outside interference, fight to surrender or death. Declan was already stripping off his clothes, his enforcers backing away to give him space. He shifted with the ease of someone who'd done it 10,000 times, his wolf emerging in a ripple of golden brown fur. He was massive, easily 300 pounds of muscle and fury. But Lyria wasn't afraid. She'd been afraid of him for 18 years. She was done being afraid. She shifted, her white wolf bursting forth with a snarl that echoed across the courtyard. And then she launched herself at Declan with every ounce of speed and rage her wolf possessed. The fight was brutal. Declan fought like a seasoned warrior, precise, efficient, going for kill shots with practiced ease. But Lyria fought like something wild and desperate, all instinct and fury. She was smaller, yes, but faster, and she had something Declan didn't. She had nothing left to lose. They crashed together in a tangle of claws and teeth, rolling across the frozen ground. Declan's jaws snapped inches from her throat. Lyria twisted, her claws raking across his shoulder, drawing first blood. The crowd roared. They separated, circling each other, both breathing hard. Declan's eyes were cold and calculating. He'd underestimated her, and now he knew it. You can't win this, he said, his voice carrying the dual tones of a wolf speaking. You're still just a scared little girl playing at being strong. Lyria's wolf snarled. And you're still the coward who poisoned a child because he was afraid of what she'd become. She lunged again, and this time she went low, using her smaller size to slip beneath his guard. Her jaws closed around his front leg, and she bit, hard enough to crack bone. Declan howled in pain and rage. He threw his weight against her, using his superior size to slam her into the ground. Lyria's ribs screamed in protest, but she rolled with the impact, avoiding his follow-up bite. They fought for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Lyria was bleeding from a dozen wounds, her white fur stained red. But so was Declan, and she could see him tiring, his movements becoming slower, less precise. She just had to outlast him. Declan lunged one more time, going for her throat, the kill shot. But Lyria had been waiting for it. She dropped flat, letting his momentum carry him over her, and then surged upward, her jaws locking around the back of his neck. It was the same hold Riven had taught her in training, the one that gave her complete control. Declan thrashed, trying to throw her off. But Lyria held on with everything she had. Her jaws tightened, and she felt the exact moment when Declan's wolf realized it was over. He went still. And then he shifted back to human beneath her, the universal sign of surrender. Lyria released him and stepped back, shifting as well. She stood over his broken form, bleeding and exhausted but victorious. It's over, she said quietly. Iron Ridge is mine now. Declan looked up at her with hatred burning in his pale eyes. You think you've won? You think killing me will change anything? There are others, wolves, who will never accept a white wolf ruling? Then they can challenge me too, Lyria said, and they'll end up exactly where you are. She turned to face the gathered alphas and found them all staring at her with a mix of awe and wariness. Alpha Garrett stepped forward, his expression grave. By the laws of trial by combat, he announced, Lyria Hale has defeated Alpha Declan Voss in fair combat. Iron Ridge territory and all its assets are hereby transferred to her control. He paused, then added, and by extension, to the Northern Territories under High Alpha Riven Thorn's rule. A murmur ran through the crowd. Lyria had just expanded Riven's territory significantly, but more than that, she'd proven herself in front of every major alpha in the wolf world. She wasn't just a white wolf. She was a victorious white wolf. Riven appeared at her side, wrapping a cloak around her shoulders. His eyes were bright with pride and something fiercer. "Well done," he murmured. Before Lyria could respond, a new voice cut through the crowd. "Impressive." Every wolf turned toward the speaker. A man stood at the edge of the circle, tall and lean, with black hair shot through with silver and eyes the color of amber. He wore expensive clothes and moved with the kind of confidence that came from absolute power. Lyria didn't recognize him, but she felt Riven go rigid beside her. "Aldrich Kane," Riven said, and there was pure venom in his voice. The name sent a chill through Lyria. Kane, the same last name as Marcus, the enforcer who'd been murdered with that cryptic message carved into his chest. Aldrich smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd just cornered its prey. "Hi, Alpha. How good to see you again. And this must be the lovely Lyria I've heard so much about." His amber eyes fixed on her with unnerving intensity. "The last white wolf. I've been searching for you for a very long time." "Who are you?" Lyria demanded. "Aldrich Kane, Alpha of the Shadow Ridge Pack, and your grandfather." The world tilted. Lyria stared at the man in front of her, her mind refusing to process what he'd just said. "That's impossible. My grandparents died." "Your mother's parents died," Aldrich interrupted. "But your father was my son, which makes you my granddaughter, and the rightful heir to Shadow Ridge, the most powerful pack in the Eastern Territories." Riven stepped between them, his body tense with aggression. "Shadow Ridge was dissolved 20 years ago after you tried to restart the Purge Wars. You have no claim to any territory. And yet here I stand," Aldrich said pleasantly, "with an army of wolves loyal to me and a very specific interest in ensuring my granddaughter takes her rightful place in our world." Lyria's wolf snarled with instinctive distrust. "I don't know you. I don't want anything from you." "Don't you?" Aldrich's smile widened. "I can give you everything, Lyria. Power, territory, the truth about your bloodline, and why you're so much more than just a white wolf. All I ask in return is that you come with me. Let me teach you what you really are." "She's not going anywhere with you," Riven growled. Aldrich's eyes flicked to him, and for the first time there was something dangerous in his expression. "That's not your decision to make, High Alpha. Lyria is of age. She can choose her own path." He looked back at Lyria, and his voice softened. "I know you have questions about your parents, about why Iron Ridge was so desperate to keep you suppressed, about the message carved into Marcus's chest." He paused, letting that sink in. "Yes, I'm the one who killed him. He was my nephew, but he betrayed our bloodline by trying to harm you. I couldn't let that go unpunished." Lyria's blood ran cold. "You killed your own nephew to protect you," Aldrich said. "Because you're family, Lyria. The only family I have left. And I won't let anyone, not Iron Ridge, not the High Alpha, not anyone stand between us." The threat in those words was unmistakable. Riven's wolf pushed to the surface, his eyes flashing with dominance. "You need to leave, now." Aldrich held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm going. But Lyria, know this. When you're ready to learn the truth about what you are and why the entire wolf world fears you, I'll be waiting. Shadow Ridge remembers its children, and we take care of our own." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of wolves. Lyria stood frozen, her mind spinning. She'd just learned she had a grandfather she never knew existed. A grandfather who commanded an illegal pack and had just admitted to murder. A grandfather who seemed to know far more about her bloodline than anyone else. And he wanted her to join him. "Don't even think about it," Riven said quietly. Lyria looked at him, at the man who'd saved her life and given her back her wolf. The man who'd stood beside her through every fight, every challenge, every moment of doubt. Her mate. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "Whatever Aldrich Kane thinks he knows, I don't trust him. And I'm not abandoning everything we've built for some fantasy of a family that was never there when I needed them." Riven's expression softened with relief. "Good, because we're not done yet." Lyria nodded, looking back at the crowd of alphas who were still watching her with wary fascination. She'd won the fight against Declan, had claimed Iron Ridge, had proven herself in front of the entire wolf world, but she'd also just painted an even bigger target on her back, because now everyone knew she was the last white wolf. And there were wolves out there, like Aldrich Kane, who would do anything to control her. The war was far from over, but for the first time in her life, Lyria wasn't fighting it alone. The summit dissolved into chaos within minutes of Aldrich Kane's departure. Alphas who'd watched Lyria's victory with cautious respect now looked at her with open suspicion. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. Shadow Ridge, the Purge Wars, the bloodline that had nearly destroyed the wolf world a generation ago. And standing in the center of it all was Lyria, bleeding from her fight with Declan, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, and trying to process the fact that her grandfather was apparently a war criminal. "We need to leave," Riven said quietly, his hand firm on her lower back. "Now." But before they could move, Alpha Garrett stepped forward, blocking their path. His scarred face was grave, and behind him stood a dozen other Southern Alphas, all of them radiating tension. "Not so fast, High Alpha," Garrett said. "I think we need to have a conversation about what just happened here." Riven's eyes flashed dangerously. "Stand aside, Garrett." "I can't do that. Not when we just learned that the girl you've claimed as your mate is Aldrich Kane's granddaughter." Garrett's gaze shifted to Lyria. "No offense meant to you, young one, but your grandfather tried to restart the Purge Wars 20 years ago. He believed white wolves should rule over all other packs by force. Thousands died before we finally drove him into hiding." "I didn't know he existed until 5 minutes ago," Lyria said, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor running through her limbs. "Whatever he did, I had no part in it." "Maybe not," another Alpha said, a woman with red hair and sharp features. "But blood calls to blood. How do we know you're not working with him? That this whole thing, your exile, your rescue, your sudden appearance at Summit, wasn't orchestrated to put a white wolf back in power?" "That's insane," Kate interjected, moving to flank Riven. "Lyria was poisoned for 18 years, left to die in a blizzard. If Aldrich Kane wanted her in power, he had a damn strange way of showing it." "Or maybe Iron Ridge was working against him," the red-haired Alpha countered. "Maybe they knew what she was and tried to eliminate her before Kane could claim her. And now that they've failed, he's making his move." The accusations were spiraling out of control, and Lyria could feel the mood of the crowd shifting from wary to hostile. These Alphas had lived through the Purge Wars. They'd lost pack members to Aldrich Kane's vision of white wolf supremacy. And now they were looking at her like she was the opening move in a new war. "Enough!" Riven's voice cracked like a whip, silencing the murmurs. His wolf pushed to the surface, making his presence so overwhelming that even the dominant Alphas took an involuntary step back. "Lyria is my mate. She's under my protection. And if anyone here has a problem with that, they can challenge me directly instead of hiding behind conspiracy theories." Garrett's expression hardened. "This isn't about challenging you, Riven. It's about protecting our packs from another purge. The Council of Alphas has a right to demand assurances." "Then here's your assurance," Lyria interrupted, her own wolf rising to meet Riven's. Her eyes blazed silver as she stepped forward, letting every wolf present feel the weight of her power. "I am not my grandfather. I don't know his plans. I don't share his vision, and I sure as hell won't let anyone use me as a weapon in their war. I fought for my life and my freedom, not for some twisted legacy I never asked for." She turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of every Alpha watching her. "You want to judge me based on bloodline? Fine. But judge me on what I've done, not what someone else did 20 years ago. I survived 18 years of poison. I survived exile in a blizzard that should have killed me. I took back my wolf, defeated the Alpha who tried to murder me, and claimed Iron Ridge as my own. That's who I am. Not Aldrich Kane's granddaughter, not some pawn in a prophecy. Me." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Garrett spoke, and his voice was quieter than before. "What about Iron Ridge itself? You claimed it through combat, which is your right. But what are your intentions for the territory? For the wolves who served under Declan?" Lyria took a breath, forcing herself to think past the adrenaline and pain. This was important. How she answered this question would determine whether the other Alphas saw her as a leader or a threat. "I'm going back to Iron Ridge," she said. "I'm going to tear down everything Declan and his council built. The corruption, the lies, the culture that thought poisoning children was acceptable. And then I'm going to rebuild it as something better. A pack where strength isn't measured by how well you can suppress others, but by how well you can protect them. Pretty words, the red-haired alpha said. But how do we know you'll follow through? Because I'll be there to make sure she does, Riven said. He moved to stand beside Lyria, his hand finding hers. Iron Ridge will be absorbed into the Northern Territories under my oversight. Lyria will rule as Alpha of Iron Ridge, but she'll answer to me, and I'll answer to this council if she steps out of line. It was a political move, giving the other Alphas oversight while still allowing Lyria autonomy. Riven was putting his own reputation on the line to vouch for her. Garrett studied them both for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. That's acceptable. But there's one more condition. If Aldrich Kane makes contact with you again, you report it to this council immediately. We need to know if he's planning to make a move. Agreed, Lyria said. Then as far as I'm concerned, the matter is settled, Garrett said. He extended his hand to Lyria. Welcome to the council, Alpha Hale. Lyria shook his hand, feeling the weight of what she'd just accepted. She was an alpha now, a leader, responsible for an entire pack's well-being. It was terrifying. It was also exactly what she wanted. As the other alphas began to disperse, murmuring amongst themselves, Riven pulled Lyria aside. His eyes were dark with concern. Are you all right? I just found out my grandfather is a war criminal who wants to use me to restart a conflict that killed thousands, Lyria said. So no, not really. We'll deal with Kane, Riven promised. But first we need to get you medical attention. You're still bleeding. Lyria looked down and realized he was right. The adrenaline from the fight was wearing off, and pain was starting to creep in. Ribs that might be cracked, cuts that needed stitches, muscles screaming in protest. I'll survive, she said. I know you will. You always do. Riven's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Lyria leaned into his touch, drawing strength from the mate bond that thrummed between them. I love you, she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but... Riven kissed her, cutting off the rambling explanation. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing with emotion. I love you too. Have since the moment I found you in that snowbank. You're the strongest, most stubborn, most infuriating woman I've ever met. And you're mine. Yours, Lyria agreed, smiling despite the pain. A throat cleared behind them. Cade stood a respectful distance away, trying and failing to hide a grin. Sorry to interrupt the moment, but we need to move. Some of Declan's former enforcers are making noise about challenging the transfer of power. We should get to Iron Ridge before they organize a resistance. Riven's expression hardened. Then let's go remind them what happens when you challenge a white wolf. They reached Iron Ridge territory 3 hours later. The compound looked exactly as Lyria remembered. Stone buildings clustered around a central hall, surrounded by dense forest. But now, instead of feeling like home, it felt like a prison she'd finally escaped. Word of her victory had clearly spread. Wolves lined the path to the main hall, their expressions ranging from shock to fear to barely concealed hostility. Lyria walked through them with her head high, Riven on one side and Cade on the other, her white wolf barely contained beneath her skin. The hall doors stood open. Inside, the remaining council members had gathered, 5 elderly wolves who'd served under Declan, all of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sarah was there too. Lyria's foster mother stood near the back, her face pale, her hands clasped in front of her. When their eyes met, Sarah flinched. Lyria, she whispered, you're alive. No thanks to you, Lyria said coldly. She turned her attention to the council. I'm sure you've all heard by now. I defeated Alpha Declan in trial by combat. Iron Ridge is mine, which means you answer to me now. The eldest council member, a man named Garrett, who'd always looked at Lyria like she was something unpleasant he'd stepped in, cleared his throat. With all due respect, you're barely 18 years old. You have no experience leading a pack. I have more experience surviving than any of you, Lyria interrupted, which is more than I can say for the people you claim to lead. How many other children did you poison? How many other wolves did you suppress because you were afraid of their power? Silence. That's what I thought. Lyria stepped forward, letting her wolf rise close enough to the surface that her eyes began to glow. Here's how this is going to work. You're all under investigation for conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, and treason against your own pack. If you cooperate and provide testimony about who gave the orders and how long the poisoning went on, I'll consider exile instead of execution. If you refuse, she let the threat hang in the air. You can't do this, Garrett protested. We were protecting the pack. From what? A 6-year-old girl? Lyria's voice was sharp enough to cut. You murdered my parents. You poisoned me for 12 years. You stood by while Declan exiled me to die. Tell me, what exactly were you protecting? Garrett's face flushed with anger. You don't understand. Your bloodline is dangerous. The White Wolves nearly destroyed everything our ancestors built. We couldn't risk— Then you should have killed me outright instead of making me suffer, Lyria said flatly. At least that would have been honest. Instead, you tortured a child for over a decade and called it protection. So no, I don't think you get to lecture me about risk. She turned to Riven. Take them into custody. I want full confessions within 48 hours. Northern Territory enforcers moved forward to secure the council members. They went quietly, all the fight drained out of them, all except Sarah. Lyria's foster mother stepped forward, her eyes pleading. Lyria, please, I know you're angry, but I was just following orders. I never wanted to hurt you. You fed me poison every single day, Lyria said, her voice eerily calm. You watched me cry because I thought I was broken. You let me believe my parents died in a random attack when you knew the truth. And when Declan exiled me, you stood there and said nothing. She took a step closer. So don't you dare stand there and tell me you never wanted to hurt me. Sarah's face crumpled. I did care about you. In my own way, your way involved systematic abuse and attempted murder, Lyria said. So forgive me if I don't find that very comforting. She looked at the enforcers. Take her with the others. As Sarah was led away, still trying to plead her case, Lyria felt something inside her chest finally break free. The last chain connecting her to the girl she'd been. The wolfless, frightened child who'd believed she deserved the suffering inflicted on her. That girl was gone. In her place stood an alpha. Over the next 3 months, Lyria transformed Iron Ridge from the ground up. She started by releasing every suppressed wolf in the pack. And there were more than she'd expected. At least a dozen young wolves who'd been deemed too aggressive or too dominant and quietly medicated into submission. When their suppressants were removed and their wolves allowed to surface, they became some of Lyria's most loyal supporters. She dissolved the old council and established a new one. Younger wolves, tested in combat, chosen for their integrity rather than their political connections. Cade helped her navigate the transition, teaching her the difference between leading through fear and leading through respect. The pack didn't accept her immediately. There were challenges. 3 different wolves who thought they could take power from a newly awakened alpha. Lyria defeated each of them, and by the 3rd victory, the challenges stopped. Riven visited every week, helping her establish trade agreements with neighboring packs and mediating disputes that threatened to turn violent. Their bond grew stronger with every shared crisis, every late-night strategy session, every moment they stole alone between meetings and missions. And through it all, there was no sign of Aldrich Kane. But Lyria knew he was out there, watching, waiting. The confrontation came on a cold night in late spring. Lyria was alone in her office, reviewing supply manifests, when she felt it, a presence on the edge of pack territory. Old and powerful and undeniably familiar. Her wolf snarled in recognition. She shifted and ran, following the scent deep into the forest until she found him standing in a clearing. Aldrich Kane looked exactly as he had at Summit, tall and confident, dressed in dark clothes that blended with the shadows. "Hello, granddaughter," he said. Lyria shifted back to human, uncaring of her nakedness. "You're trespassing on Iron Ridge land." "I'm visiting family," Aldrich corrected. "There's a difference." "Not in my territory, there isn't." Lyria crossed her arms. "What do you want?" "To talk. Away from the High Alpha's influence." Aldrich gestured to a fallen log. "Will you sit with me, just for a moment?" Every instinct Lyria had screamed at her to refuse, but curiosity won out. She sat, keeping enough distance that she could react if he attacked. Aldrich smiled, reading her caution. Smart. Your father would be proud. You knew my father. He was my son, Aldrich said simply. Alexander Kane. He was brilliant and kind and absolutely convinced that white wolves could coexist peacefully with the other packs. I thought he was naive. Turns out, I was the one who didn't understand. Lyria's chest tightened. What happened to him? The truth this time. The truth is that I failed him, Aldrich said, and for the first time there was genuine emotion in his voice. I was so obsessed with restoring white wolf dominance that I pushed him away. He fell in love with your mother, a common wolf from Iron Ridge, and I forbade the union. He left Shadow Ridge and never came back. He paused. When I heard he'd been killed, I tried to find you, but Iron Ridge had already buried the truth and hidden you away. By the time I tracked you down, you'd been poisoned so thoroughly, I thought you'd never recover. So you stayed away. I stayed away because I thought it was kinder than watching you waste away, Aldrich admitted. I thought the kindest thing I could do was let you die peacefully instead of suffering. His amber eyes met hers. I was wrong. I underestimated you, just like everyone else. Lyria didn't know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to rage at him for abandoning her, but another part understood, because she knew what it was like to make impossible choices with no good options. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because you need to know the truth about what you are, Aldrich said. You're not just a white wolf, Lyria. You're the daughter of two bloodlines, Kane on your father's side and Theron on your mother's. The name hit like a thunderbolt. Theron, the royal line that had ruled the Northern Territories before the Purge Wars. My mother was a Theron? Lyria whispered. The last of her line. That's why Iron Ridge was so desperate to suppress you. You carry the blood of the two most powerful wolf dynasties ever to exist. If you fully awakened, if you claimed your birthright, you'd have the legitimate authority to unite every pack under your rule. Lyria's head was spinning. That's insane. I don't want to rule everyone. I know, Aldrich said gently. That's what makes you different from me. I wanted power for power's sake. You just want to protect your people. That's why you'll succeed where I failed. He stood, brushing pine needles from his pants. I came here to offer you a choice. Join me. Let me teach you everything about your bloodline, the history, the power, the responsibilities. Not to restart the Purge Wars, but to prevent them, to build something better than what we had before. And if I refuse? Aldrich's smile was sad. Then I'll respect your decision and disappear from your life. But know this, there are forces in the wolf world who will never accept you, who see you as a threat to be eliminated. And when they come for you, I won't be there to help. Lyria stood as well, meeting his gaze. I have Riven. I have my pack. I don't need you. Perhaps not, Aldrich agreed. But the offer stands. If you ever change your mind, you know how to find me. He turned to leave, but Lyria's voice stopped him. Did you love him? My father? Aldrich looked back, and his expression was raw. More than anything. Which is why losing him broke something in me I've never been able to fix. He paused. Don't make my mistakes, Lyria. Don't let pride or fear keep you from the people who matter. You've found your mate. Hold on to him. Fight for him. Because losing that bond is a pain that never heals. Then he was gone, disappearing into the forest like a ghost. Lyria stood alone in the clearing, her mind reeling from everything she'd learned. She was the last heir of two royal bloodlines. She had a grandfather who wanted to teach her to be a queen, and somewhere out there were enemies who would stop at nothing to see her dead. But as she shifted and ran back toward Iron Ridge, toward the home she'd built, and the pack she'd claimed, and the mate who was probably already searching for her, Lyria realized something important. She wasn't afraid anymore. Let them come. Let them challenge her. Let them try to tear down everything she'd built. She was a white wolf, the daughter of Kane and Theron, the alpha who'd survived poison and exile and a blizzard that should have killed her. And she wasn't done fighting yet. Hinga. 6 months later, the Northern Territories held a formal ceremony to recognize Lyria as Alpha of Iron Ridge. Every major pack sent representatives. The ceremony was held in Silverstone Hall, the same place where Lyria had defeated Declan and claimed her birthright. But this time, instead of hostile stares and whispered threats, she was greeted with respect. She'd earned it. Iron Ridge had transformed under her leadership. The poisoning program had been dismantled, the corrupt council exiled, and a new culture of strength through unity established. Young wolves flocked to her pack, drawn by stories of the alpha who'd risen from nothing to claim everything. Lyria stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, dressed in formal white, a color she'd once hated but now wore with pride. Riven stood beside her, magnificent in black, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. Alpha Garrett stepped forward, carrying an ornate silver collar, the mark of recognized Alpha authority. "Lyria Hale," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "You have proven yourself in combat, in leadership, and in service to the wolf world. By the authority of the Council of Alphas, I recognize you as Alpha of Iron Ridge, with all rights and responsibilities that title entails." He fastened the collar around her neck. It was heavy and cold, but Lyria wore it like a crown. The hall erupted in howls, hundreds of wolves acknowledging her authority. Lyria threw back her head and howled with them, her voice rising above the crowd. And when she looked out at the gathered wolves, she saw something she'd never seen before directed at her. Not fear, not pity, respect. After the ceremony, Riven pulled her into one of the private rooms off the main hall. Before she could ask what he was doing, he kissed her, deep and claiming and full of promise. "I'm proud of you," he murmured against her lips. "I couldn't have done it without you," Lyria said. "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." Riven pulled back slightly, his gray eyes intense. "I have something for you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a white stone that caught the light like captured moonlight. "Lyria Hale," Riven said, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not just my mate, but my partner in everything. My equal, my advisor, my—" "Yes," Lyria interrupted, laughing through sudden tears. "Yes, absolutely, yes." Riven slipped the ring onto her finger, and Lyria felt the bond between them surge with warmth and joy and absolute certainty. This was right. This was home. Not a place, not a territory, but this man, this bond, this moment. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Riven said. "My white wolf, my queen." Lyria kissed him again, and through the window behind them, the first snow of winter began to fall. Once, snow had meant death, exile, the frozen wasteland where she was left to die. Now it meant something else entirely: survival, transformation, the reminder that even in the coldest, darkest moments, strength could bloom. Lyria had been poisoned, exiled, left for dead in a blizzard. She'd been told she was worthless, broken, less than nothing. But she'd survived. She'd awakened her wolf, claimed her birthright, and built something new from the ashes of what had tried to destroy her. And standing beside the man she loved, wearing the collar of alpha authority and the ring of eternal commitment, Lyria finally understood the truth. She wasn't the girl they'd tried to erase. She was the queen they'd created by mistake. And she was just getting started. In the shadows beyond Silverstone Hall, Aldrich Kane watched his granddaughter through the window. He saw her happiness, her strength, her absolute certainty in the life she'd chosen. And for the first time in 20 years, he smiled without bitterness. "Goodbye, Alexander," he whispered to the son he'd lost. "Your daughter is everything you hoped she'd be. She'll be all right." Then he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Lyria to write her own story. One that didn't need him, one that she'd earned entirely on her own. The white wolf had risen, and the world would never be the same.